Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today, to celebrate International Women's Day, I thought I would make a video highlighting the female winners of the Nobel Prize for Literature and talk to you about a little challenge of reading all 16 of them. So, in my video, I think it was to introduce my my reading goals for 2022. I talked about how I started making a list and thinking about doing this challenge, which is to read all of the female Nobel laureates. There are 16 women who have won the Nobel Prize for Literature, starting in 1909, and the last one was in 2020. So it spans, two different centuries or millenniums, if you want to go that way. But yes, it's very interesting. I think this is a challenge to get me out of my comfort zone, out of things that I usually read. But I also think it's a little bit of a brainy challenge in terms of, with literary fiction, sometimes it does feel like that. Things are a bit more experimental. And I think that would be really cool to try to read those things and also to learn. A lot of these writers have written about human condition, depending on the region or the country they're from, or even from just their own people. And I think that will allow me to learn more about these different conditions and situation and backgrounds. And I think that that's always something, when I'm constantly wanting to learn, I think this is a great way to do that. So yeah, I thought I'd dip my toe into doing some research in terms of what can I find, because some of their work, especially the older ones, are difficult to find. What's in translation, of course, because they span very many different languages. And also, what sounds interesting to me, what I want to read. I also wanted to add, before I kind of go on to talking about each one of them, that I created a challenge on the Storygraph, and you're welcome to come and join me. I'll put the link in the description below. It's not open-ended, but it's very much is in that, I've put the deadline for end of 2023, but it can be longer than that. I just wanted to invite people to kind of join me in this challenge of reading the female Nobel laureates for literature. I believe, I'm sure I'm not the only one that have thought about this, I'm sure many people have done that. But yeah, I've created that. I would love to do buddy reads if you're interested in any of them. I would love to kind of chat with people. So if you're interested, message me, join the Storygraph challenge. It's nothing that's timely, I'm not being like, let's read all of them next month. No, we'll take our time. I want us to appreciate it. Maybe even discussion might be great, because some of this work looks really brainy and kind of experimental. Maybe that's great to be able to talk about it with someone. So maybe some of them we can do read along. So it's a big kind of idea and project and challenge, but please feel free to join me. I know it's a little bit niche, but I think we can all do it, reading some stuff that's a little bit out of our comfort zone. So without further ado, let's start with Selma Lagerloff. So the first female winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature was in 1909, and it was Selma Lagerloff from Sweden. She won, and there's a little paragraph for everyone in terms of why they won. So I'll read it. They get more and more vague as you go. So you'll be able to see that. And it's sometimes I have no idea what they're talking about. But anyway, for Selma Lagerloff, it says, in appreciation of the lofty idealism, vivid imagination, and spiritual perception that characterize her writings. So she's, I think, most famous for her Gösta Berling's saga. So I think that's one of the oldest work. Obviously, this is the oldest Nobel Prize in Literature, but this was published, I believe, in the second half or late 19th century, so in the late 1800s. I found her book, The Wonderful Adventures of Nils, which is actually children's literature, and I think it's much beloved, especially in Sweden. And I thought I could start with that. I think maybe, that's maybe the more accessible version to start with, as it's a children's book. But yeah, so that's quite exciting. I found a copy as well, so I'll be able to tackle that one whenever I get to it. So yes. Then we had to wait quite a few years for the next one, because the next female Nobel winner was in 1926. And that was Grazia Deledda from Italy. I love that recently I was doing some research, and they're like, before Elena Ferrante, there was Grazia Deledda. So I'm just like, okay, I don't know if they're just doing the link because they're both female Italian writers, but you know, I've enjoyed enough the first book that I read by Ferrante, so if it's any indication, I'm hoping I'll enjoy Delida's writing as well. So she won for her idealistically inspired writing, which with plastic clarity pictured the life of her native island, and with depth and sympathy deal with human problems in general. So I believe that she's from Sardinia, and I think one of actually her most or first novels was actually The Flowers of Sardinia. But I found a copy in translation of After the Divorce, and also one of her work that is stated as being really important, and the one that brought her like international acclaim was Elias Bartolu. So I'll try to see if I can find it. I think, you know, it would be a good one to maybe start with, but I have a copy of After the Divorce. I may start with that. It's difficult sometimes, like I don't want to just read what I find, but also some of these works are in translation and harder to find, so I'll have to make do. But I also will do a deeper dive into like my local library and what I can find online and stuff like that. But yes. Then only 2 years later, we have Sigrid Undset from Norway, who won the Nobel Prize. She won principally for her powerful descriptions of northern life during the Middle Ages. I think her most famous work, and the one that I'd like to tackle, is the Kristin Lavransdatter trilogy. And this was highly recommended actually by, I believe it's Chelsea from Voyage of a Time Wanderer channel. So it made me really excited because she said she read all 3 books, and I think it's over 1,000 pages in like a long weekend or like a couple of days because she was so into it, and that made me really excited. So I think it'd be really great because I work in travel and I work in writing, and I work very much in kind of the Nordic, Scandinavian culture, and I'm very excited to read kind of more from those regions and learn more as well, like historically. So I think this is going to be I'm really excited about this one. Then 10 years later, in 1938, we have our next female winner, which was Pearl Buck from the United States. Although I believe that she spent most of her life in China, and this is kind of highlighted in the reason why she won, which is for her rich and truly epic descriptions of peasant life in China, and for her biographical masterpieces. And the few books that people are recommending and that I've been able to find are all based in China. I do have a weird feeling about reading a book by a white person, like describing the life in a country and from a culture that they're not really a part of, but she grew up there, she lived most of her life there, and apparently it's really great, but I just don't know how well this statement from the Nobel 1938 has aged. So if you've read it, let me know what you thought about it. So the 2 works by Buck that I found that I think I will start with are East Wind, West Wind, and also the first in a separate trilogy, and it starts with The Good Earth. So I thought I'd start with that. I think it's mostly for her trilogy actually that she's, I think it's like almost like a family saga. So I'm kind of looking forward to trying it, but I also look forward to kind of hearing what people have to say about reading it in kind of today's, or with today's literary kind of sensitivity, but yes, we'll see. Then throughout the Second World War, there wasn't actually that many winners, but in 1945, the year that the war ended, Gabriela Mistral from Chile won the Nobel Prize. Obviously, I've heard about her. We had a poem by her read at our wedding, and I'm just, a big fan of hers already. Currently, the poetry collection I want to read is Locas Mujeres, which is Mad Women, and I think it's also kind of tackling a bit of a subject that I'm very kind of personally interested in. So yeah, but she won for her lyric poetry, which, inspired by powerful emotions, has made her name a symbol of the idealistic aspiration of the entire Latin American world. I don't know if she was the first American to have won. I've not gone that far in that research. Yeah, I want to try to find more by her, and it's difficult to find stuff in translation. I'd like to read stuff in the original Spanish as well. I believe the collection I have has both, so that's kind of exciting to be able to see original and translation. Especially if you read a language, I think it's really important to try to read in that language if it's the original. But yes. Then we have to jump 21 years for the next female winner. Ugh. So, in 1966, Nelly Sachs from Germany won. So she is she's a German writer with Jewish roots. And actually it was so interesting. I was reading the story of her life, and she became really interested in Selma Lagerloff's writing, and they started corresponding. How cool is that? And actually Lagerloff helped Nelly Sachs and her mother escaped Germany during the Second World War. What an incredible story. Anyway, I didn't expect that kind of link between the winners, but yeah, I thought that was a really great story. So she won for her outstanding lyrical and dramatic writing, which interprets Israel's destiny with touching strength. I've found it really difficult to find anything by her. I think she has a few collections in translation, but I found it really difficult to get my hands on one of them. I have found a few of her poems online, and actually she has an upcoming collection in translation, which is called Flight and Metamorphosis. That was incorrect. Flight and Metamorphosis. I can't say this word. Flight and Metamorphosis. I know how to say this word, I just cannot do it somehow. Metamorphosis. There you go. Did it. Anyway, this is coming out translation 2022, and I'm going to try to see if I can find or get my hands on a copy. I found a few of those poems published online, but I don't want to just read like a poem. I think that's a bit of a cop-out. Then we have to wait 25 years for the next female winner. Honestly, let's not dwell on that. Anyway, in 1991, Nadine Gordimer won. She's a South African writer. It says, who through her magnificent epic writing has, in the world of Alfred Nobel, been a very great benefit to humanity. I feel like that's very broad statement. But anyway, it's her novel The Conservationist that kind of won her critical acclaim, and I think that was published in the 70s, and I have found a copy of that. So I'm kind of excited to start with that and see kind of, what that says about South Africa, and also what kind of writing that she does, because it seems to say epic writing. So, big expectations. Like, I feel like the Nobel is giving you like a standard that's quite high, so high expectations. Then 2 years later, Toni Morrison won in 1993. She won, it says, Toni Morrison, who in novels characterized by visionary force and poetic import, gives life to an essential aspect of American reality. Obviously, don't know, I can't be talking for everyone, but I feel like most people will have heard of her. A lot of people will have read one of her novels. I have a copy of Beloved, which I've been meaning to read for ages. Sometimes I kind of anticipate reads sometimes, and I'm like, oh, how harrowing is it gonna be, or how difficult. But this is a novel that I really, really need to read in the coming year. I really want to read it, and I think it's going to be so good. The Nobel page for Toni Morrison also includes like some of her other novels, including like The Bluest Eye. So I feel like there's so much by her to read and to appreciate, and I just want to finally, do that. Then again, we only could wait a couple of years till 1996 for the next female winner, which was Vizlava Shimboska. So she was a writer from Poland, and she won for poetry that with ironic precision allows a historical and biological context to come to light in fragments of human reality. Oh yeah, this is where it gets really vague. I was just like, what does that mean? Anyway, I found a copy of one of her kind of recent collection published just before she passed away. It's called Here in the English Translation, and it was published in 2009. She passed away, I believe, in 2012, and there was another collection published after that as well. So these were the 9 women who won in the 20th century. So now we are in the 21st century, and 7 women have won already, and we're only 22 years into it. So, already I feel like that's better than the 9 who won in the 100 years of the 20th century. Anyway, so the first winner was in 2004. It was Alfreda Yelanek from Austria. So she won for her musical flow of voices and counter voices in novels and plays that with extraordinary linguistic zeal reveal the absurdity of society's cliches and their subjugating power. Actually, that one I feel like makes sense. I feel like I know what they're trying to say. I believe she wrote poetry, novels, and yeah, like it says plays and like librettos for like operas. She's clearly like an all-rounder, which is incredible and really inspiring. So I think her most famous novels are The Piano Teacher and Lust. And I've never heard from her or from these books. On the Nobel page, it also said like that a lot of her writing is like about uncovering hidden structures of sexism, sadism, and submission. So I think that even like just with the title Lust, I feel like you already have an idea about that. I found a copy of one of her most recent novel, Rheingold. I think it was originally written as a libretto actually for the Berlin Opera, but it was made into a novel. So that's the one that I have. I'll start with that as I'll see. I feel like with the ones that I've not heard about before, I think, you know, it's good to start with just what I can find, or if I've gotten like a personal recommendation, obviously. Then in 2007, Doris Lessing from the UK won the Nobel Prize. I think she's become famous for her really unimpressed reaction to winning, actually. When I think it's journalists who were like in front of her house and they kind of told her that she had won, and it's a really funny video to watch. Yeah, I recommend Googling it and just seeing her reaction. They've described her as an epicist. So it says that epicist of the female experience who, with skepticism, fire, and visionary power, has subjected a divided civilization to scrutiny. All right. I have her kind of seminal work, and obviously I think it's also one of her most experimental novels. It's The Golden Notebook, and it's also one of like, I think it's a seminal contemporary book. It's also a seminal feminist book. I think it has all of these kind of tags onto it and labels. I bought a copy ages ago when I'd heard about it. Also, I want to say 5-6 years ago, whatever, we were in Sweden and we went to the Nobel Museum, and I obviously just went immediately for the literature section. My husband stayed in the sciences and stuff. But I went to literature, and that's where I learned about her. And when I got home, I found a copy of the Golden Notebook in the charity shop, and I bought a copy immediately. And then I recommended her book at my feminist book club, and then I never read it. It's a huge book. Loads of people have DNF'd it. It's very experimental. It's basically following an author who keeps various notebooks about different facets of her life, includes like sex, includes her political thoughts, a diary, and then she's trying kind of later in her life to bring them all together in a golden notebook, because they all have a different color. So in the golden notebook, she'll try to kind of bring them all together, and it sounds so interesting, but also yeah, it's apparently a little bit difficult to read, so we'll see. Then in 2009, Herta Muller won the Nobel Prize. She is from Romania, although I think she's currently residing in Germany. It says, Herta Muller, who, with the concentration of poetry and the frankness of prose, depicts the landscape of the dispossessed. So she's written plenty of novels that have been translated. I think she's also written very much so about like how it is to live under, I think it's a Ceausescu, is that how you pronounce it? In Romania, and I think that's also why like she had to leave Romania to go to Germany, and a lot of her books were even banned in Romania. So it sounds really interesting, but there's plenty of novels in translation. I just, because I'd never heard of her, and even the Nobel actually doesn't highlight a specific novel. So if you have read a novel by her, please let me know if you recommend it, if you have any titles that you think I should start with, kind of opening the discussion here. And next, in 2013, Alice Munro from Canada won. I have a really funny story about that, because 2013 is the year I graduated from St. Andrews, and literally like 6 months later, I was at a alumni dinner, and it was her editor who was there because he'd gone to St. Andrews, and he just actually went to the Nobel Prize reception for when she won, and I thought that was just incredible, and I felt so I don't know, grateful to be like hearing his stories, and yeah, that was just lovely. Yeah, so she's quite famous. Obviously, I'm from Canada, so for me, like it's obviously like a no-brainer. But the very short thing that they say on the Nobel is that she is a master of the contemporary short story. That's how I discovered her as well. So in obviously I took Canadian literature in university. I think we had to. It was part of like our curriculum, and we read some of her short stories, which were very good. I'm not a huge fan of short stories, just generally, but I do enjoy her kind of depictions of Canadian life and relationships. The only book by her that I read was The View from Castle Rock, and I think I found that in the charity shop, and it's because it basically starts in Scotland, because Castle Rock is the hill on which Edinburgh Castle sits on. So yeah, so it starts in Scotland, and I think it talks a little bit about like her Scottish heritage, because it starts with people who were living in Scotland and when they left to go to Canada. So yeah, so it was very interesting, very short novella kind of, so a big recommend from me. And I'll want to look into more. Obviously I've read from her before, but I want to, with this new challenge, to like look at more of her short stories that I'd like to read. In 2015, Svetlana Alexievich won. She's from Ukraine. Obviously I think she mostly grew up and is living in Belarus. So she won for her polyphonic writings, A Monument to Suffering and Courage in Our Time. I think she was a journalist, so she's done a lot of work at kind of the intersection of reporting of nonfiction and fiction. I had heard from her before because my husband and I had watched the series Chernobyl a couple of years ago. It came out like so good, and I think like her book Voices from Chernobyl, apologies, was used as research and material for creating the series. And I found a copy, and I think I'll be wanting to read that because it was just so interesting to watch, obviously because it's based on reality. And I love that she's one of the only ones, I think, who writes kind of nonfiction that has won. So I think that's also really kind of cool. It's like separate genre and style of writing. Then in 2018, Olga Tokarchuk won. She is another writer from Poland. She won for her narrative imagination that, with encyclopedic passion, represents the crossing of boundaries as a form of life. Again, a little bit of a confusing sentence here. But I was reading that she does a lot of things in contrast, like nature versus nurture, culture and science, and like a lot of these things are part of her work. I've been hearing a lot about her writing a lot as well on Booktube since last year. I think her one of her main books, and I think they call it like her magnum opus, something like that, is the Books of Jacob that was translated. And I think everyone was like taking a photo of it last year because it's this huge book. But I decided to start with something else. I thought I'd start with something, maybe Flies. I believe that won the International Booker Prize a couple of years ago. And also I found a copy of Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. So yeah, it sounds really interesting, and because I've been hearing so much about her writing, I'm quite excited to get to it. And finally, the last the last one for now, because we are in 2022. I don't believe the 2022 winner has been announced, but up to now, this is the 16th winner. From 2020, it's Louise Glueck from the United States. So she won for her unmistakable poetic voice that with austere beauty makes individual existence universal. I've never really heard from her before. I've been doing a bit of research because even the website itself of the Nobel wasn't really highlighting any specific collection. So she's written a few poetry collections. I think I'll have to see if I can find one, or if there's like a theme of one of them that kind of interests me more and I can start with. If you have read Glueck before, I would really enjoy a recommendation if there's a collection that you enjoy by her. And that's it. These were the 16 women who have won up to now. And I was so excited to do this research, actually just prior to this video, but also for this video, to not only find books, but also find out why they won and like their background and what they write about, the themes, and also form that they use in terms of like experimental or like non-fiction, fiction, like all of that, so interesting, and I hope that you'll join me in the challenge to read the women who won the Nobel Prize. As I've said at the beginning of the video, I've created a challenge on the Storygraph, so you can join me there. The link will be in the description box below. And yes, I'll continue making videos whenever I get to them, and hopefully we can also host some discussions with different people and booktubers. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of tackling this and kind of discovering writing, and especially like from like different cultures and from different centuries. I think there's going to be a really cool experience. Alright, so thank you so much for watching and making it to the end of this video, and see you back. Bye!